Hello and welcome. I'm Ben Kramer here with
Naim,
Naim Ansari,
Naim.
and we're very excited here to, spend the next 20, 30 minutes uh, talking about something that both of us are really passionate about, which comes down to complex manufacturing situations, complex distribution situations, and how we've worked, it's been 5, 6 years now, how we've been focusing in this area, right?
Right.
How Naim and I have been focusing for the last 5, 6 years on these types of clients, some of the challenges we've been facing, some of the opportunities we have. So yeah, if you're in the distribution space, if you're in the warehousing space, and especially if you're using Oracle NetSuite or if you're considering using Oracle NetSuite, hopefully you'll find this to be interesting conversation that we walk through. But
Yeah.
before we get into the meat of it, maybe just some quick introductions for those of you who don't know Naim and I. So Naim, I'll actually let you go first if you want to give us a quick introduction, your background, what you're passionate about, and kind of what led you to end up focusing in this area the last 5, 6 years.
Yeah. So let me introduce myself. My name is Naim Ansari, and currently I'm working as a NetSuite technical architect role in my organization. I have almost 10 years experience in NetSuite uh, technology, and I'm very passionate to do the customization in the NetSuite accounts as per client request. But I'm mostly focused on the manufacturing client because I love to work in the manufacturing side.
Yeah, and I'll quickly introduce myself here too. I'm Ben Kramer. I've been working in ERP also for just over a decade. Naim and I actually started around the same time. I started my career in Microsoft Dynamics, working with much larger manufacturers, and then went back in 2018, 2019, switched over to the NetSuite practice. Actually met Naim right at that time. Naim was one of the very first people I worked with when I started in NetSuite back in 2018, 2019. And we've been working together ever since. So, Naim, before we get into the depth here
Yeah.
of manufacturing, I want to pick on your backstory a little bit more, right? Because I think that will help flavor the viewpoint of a lot of people potentially listening in here. Because the reality is that NetSuite hasn't been known for a long time about
Right.
doing heavy manufacturing projects, right? Real complex integrations. We're gonna get into EDI later, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's some third parties, but like when you're talking, tens of thousands of EDI transactions a day, you're talking 400 or 500 pickers in a warehouse. That maybe isn't traditionally where, you know, the market associates Oracle NetSuite. So
Right.
tell me a bit. You and I started working together in 2019. Tell me
Correct.
about before that time, right? So your first, call it 5 years at NetSuite. What types of projects were you working on? What were the challenges in those types of projects? Because if I remember correctly, you weren't doing that much heavy manufacturing, heavy distributors work back then. So tell me some more about that.
Like yeah, in the initial days of my development, we did not get that bigger projects where we having a large amount of customization as well as there is a no client of the large amount of in distributing areas.
Yeah.
Like they have a few orders in a day of sales orders, they few orders of doing the manufacturing work orders. So and there is I did not get the chance to much work a lot in my starting career days in the EDI as well.
Yeah.
I can say, and I can 100% I did not get the chance in my career starting on the WS mobile app as well.
Yeah. Well, when we're certainly get deeper into the newest functionality around that
Yeah.
SCM WMS mobile app and how powerful that can really be. So I'm intrigued, Name. So what from 2013 to 2019, before you and I started working together, you're saying, most of your customers are smaller, right? And what
Right.
I'm wondering, Name, part of that might have been the market perception, but also
Mhm.
if we talk, before 2020 from a
Mhm.
technical perspective,
Mhm.
NetSuite was a little bit different, right? NetSuite's made a lot
Right.
of progress in the last, certainly in the last 10
Right.
years.
Right.
Um, to maybe has changed it from saying, hey, I'm a distributor, NetSuite's a good fit for me if I'm doing 100 orders a day, to now saying, well, NetSuite's still a good fit for you now if you're doing 10,000 orders a day.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit, like, what are some of the tools that you've seen develop, whether it's processors, whether it's APIs? Tell me a little bit about the technical journey that you've seen in NetSuite over the last decade.
Uh, like, uh, can you repeat this question? I did not get.
I just mean like, for example, back when you were working before, 2019,
Uh-huh.
processors were different, right?
Right.
The how concurrency worked was different. We were
Right.
still in SuiteScript 1.0. So I
One
guess
point.
what I'm trying to get to with my question is, in the earlier days of your NetSuite career,
Yeah.
yeah, there weren't as many complex manufacturing, complex distribution deals that you're working on. Part of that's because the market didn't view NetSuite in that space, but part of that's because maybe the platform wasn't quite as ready to handle, right? To handle it, right?
Right.
For example, how processors work today. In 2014, very different, right? They had the
Right.
queues and it wasn't quite as strong, right? As we think about Suite Cloud Plus licenses, we think about getting concurrency up to having 100 plus calls concurrently. All of this was a different universe, right? When you were
Right.
first starting, right?
Yeah.
So, when we fast forward to what you and I have been working on together the last 5, 6 years, almost none of our clients would be able to survive if NetSuite hadn't made significant improvements on the technical side, right? Moving from SuiteScript 1.0 to
You want to.
2.0 is a big deal, right? The introduction of MapReduce scripts, absolutely foundational
Yeah.
to the type of work. So that's the type of stuff I'm saying, right? Like, maybe tell me a little bit about how you've seen NetSuite continue to mature, to be ready to handle high volume manufacturers, high volume distributors over your 10-year journey.
Yeah, as you said already in the starting days, I saw me and my colleagues and almost every different company with my colleagues, everyone is using the 1.0 suit scripting.
Yeah.
But after a few years, after my career for 3 to 4, 5 years, everyone is going to completely switch into a 2.0, and it's kind of every company like it's mandatory thing you have to know the 2.0
Yeah. So it's
scripts.
and not just like the different API versions per se, but tell me more about, like, with 2.0 and the changes and the different types of scripts you could do in 2.0 and what's that. Tell me a little bit more about um what that actually like enables you to do today, right? That makes the platform more advanced, more ready to handle such high volume mid-market, upper mid-market clients, right? Doing those 10,000, 20,000 orders a day.
Right. Yes. So for those things, handling these type of volume, uh, they introduce a map reduce scripts to handling those. They also putting a advanced accounts where you can buy more concurrency. Like the concurrency is the main feature which empowers your account to handle more and more large data. That was the key factor. If you wanted to handle 10,000 orders in a day, and with the low concurrency, it was very hard to. It's not very hard. Like definitely, if you have a large volume, definitely you also wanted a large amount of customization. It was a proportional thing. So if you wanted to do the large amount of customization thing, then definitely you want some good amount of concurrency for your accounts. So
Yep.
that was the key feature to handle the large amount of distribution things. Because if you wanted to handle orders of more than 1,000 lines, then definitely you have to use a uh, MapReduce scripts. Why it is? Because definitely somehow definitely client having a customization like super sessions. Every client having a super session, and super session customization is totally built on the line level based on the items. So thinking like that, more than 1000 line order and you want to process a 1000 line. So definitely you need some backend process there, and definitely you have a good amount of concurrency account in your backend process as well to handle those big giant customizations.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, it's not that all NetSuite's weak and it needs to be customized. I think it's just comes down to the reality is, you know, businesses who are in the distribution game are often winning in the market because of some level of special pricing structure that they're
Correct.
doing,
I
some
agree.
level of special logic for order fulfillment, some special logic of promotional buys, right? Because
Yeah.
the distribution business itself doesn't have that many defensible strategic aspects, right? Your ability to timely and quickly fulfill an order and your operational efficiency doing that, and then some weird constructs that you might have on order placement, on
uh,
pricing, right,
yeah.
on ensuring material availability, whether that's shipping from your main warehouse or other auxiliary warehouses, whether that's shipping a like item when the current item's out. Those are the
Promotion.
nuances, right, that
Yeah.
a pure distribution business will be competing on. um,
Agree.
yeah, they might have some strategic alliances with certain vendors also. That can be a fortified strategic position. But besides their strategic alliances, which even are always at risk if their operational effectiveness isn't high, their ability to process and get orders to customers, it is the critical component, right?
Right.
And especially in a day and age like now, where when we think of distribution name when you and I were growing up,
Mhm.
if we were to, well, there wasn't even online. If we were to order something in a catalog,
Mhm.
I still remember this. I used to go to my grandmother's house every Thanksgiving, and after Thanksgiving, at the end of November, my grandmother would give us the catalog of stuff to buy for
Mhm.
Christmas, right? And we
Mhm.
would go in the book and we would circle, oh, I want this, and I want this, and I
I
want
want
this,
that.
and I want this, right? And I
Yeah.
remember my grandmother would take that book. She would decide what she was actually going to buy us, depending on how good we were that year. um, and then she would like put it in an envelope, take it to the post office, and mail that to the distribution company, right?
Mhm.
And
Okay.
those goods would show up at her door
Mhm.
sometime before Christmas, right? So we were placing that order
Like that.
November 25th, 26th, 27th, and
Mhm.
it was showing up at our door before December 25th. And I remember when I was a kid, my
Mhm.
parents, my grandparents, they all thought that was amazing, right? That you could go and get stuff delivered to you at that level of efficiency.
Yeah.
Well, fast forward 3 decades, that's not the case anymore, right? I mean, Naim, you know, with the clients that you work with,
Mhm.
it's not a matter of, oh, can you deliver this within a month, right? And that might be true for some highly specialized manufacturers that have stuff on back order for forever. Let's say like in the microchip industry, right? Or super high tech stuff that's cutting
Yeah.
edge,
Like.
small batch. Maybe they
Like.
have really long lead times. But for
Yeah.
your traditional distributor now, if it takes 24 hours, that's usually too long, right? With the emergence of quick commerce, especially in large metro areas, consumers expect now that when they order something, it's going to show up maximum 2 3 days from when they ordered it, right?
Agree. Yeah.
And often within 24 hours.
Yeah. In a future, maybe they want it in a day or in a half day, in an
Or,
hour too.
I think that is some pressure that's being faced, right? You and I have one
Right.
client. Yeah, for those who don't know, I'm based in Dubai.
Mhm.
We have one client here based in Dubai that's getting significant pressure. They used to be in the 12-hour delivery, right?
Delivery.
That when an order was placed within 12 hours, they would get it to their customers. Now they're facing significant pressure, saying if you can't get that down under 4 hours, you're going to lose our business. And I think
Yeah.
it's just because, you Amazon, the Deliveroo, Uber Eats, you name it.
Yeah.
We've moved to an on-demand uh, economy, at least for non-perishable goods, right? And for
Right.
perishable companies, maybe it's a little bit different, right? And Naim and I work with a couple perishable companies also. They have their own pressure to get stuff done fast, but maybe it's a little bit more, their supply chains are built around the fact that product is going to have a short shelf life and expire fast, right? But these other ones, whether they're, a replacement part company for motorcycles, right? Well,
Mhm.
still, if you have a belt that goes out on your motorcycle, you're going to expect when you order it online, it's going to show up the next day. So that's kind of the business environment that we exist in when we're talking about these high volume complex distributors. But Naim, maybe let's transition here. Let's start talking about our journey together. Right, you and
Yeah.
I started together in 2019. We
19.
had I mentioned motorcycles earlier. We had a distributor who dealt mostly with automotive shocks, right? So like in your car, on your tires, you have your shock system.
Yep.
We had one that dealt primarily with shocks, distributing those throughout all of the Middle East, all of Africa, all of Eastern Europe. Um, so in that project, Name, talk to me a little bit about, what they did, what they needed to use in NetSuite. Talk to me a little bit about their technical configuration for us to be able to solve that problem with them. Because they, albeit they were shipping not next day because they had to clear customs and whatnot to go around the world. But tell me some of the challenges and some of the things we had to think about from a NetSuite perspective and from a business perspective on that project.
Uh, for that project, which I remember, for the very first technical challenge we are facing, they have a different kind of pricing structure totally.
Yeah.
So we build a custom solution for that. Like we built some custom records and based on calculation, we populating the pricing when doing orders. That was the one thing.
Yeah,
And
before let's pick on that a little bit before we go on, because I think this is a similar theme with every experience Name and I are going to talk about over the last 6-7 years. You're going to hear pricing structure for distributors always a
oh,
consideration. So Name, their pricing structure, if I remember correctly, I believe that was complex because the pricing really depended on the ship to country,
right.
right? So
Agree.
they were distributing across all different countries in Middle East and Africa, and pricing was dependent on where it was going to, right? So if I think
Correct.
of Microsoft Dynamics, I think of Oracle NetSuite, well, they allow you to do pricing based on customer. They allow you to do pricing based on item, right? But if you were sending to the same customer, that customer had locations in 4 or 5 different countries, the pricing might have to be different, right? Or maybe you were sending to a distributor, say in Egypt, and that distributor themselves was going to sell it on to a different country. Well, depending on that agreement with the person that we were selling it to, if we were selling it to them with them telling us they were going to sell it to country A or country B or country C, that would dictate a different price
Right.
in that distribution model. And obviously, that's something that a standard ERP, at least most standard ERPs, are not going to be able to natively
Based
support,
on country. Yeah.
right?
Right.
Okay, so pricing, that was a big one.
And if
But
I
no
will,
issues really. I mean, we had to go through, we had to add some customization, we had to add some additional logic, but no particular issues from a pricing consideration there.
no.
Okay. What else? What else did we face on them? I believe, if I remember correctly, this company did not do their own warehousing, right? They worked with a 3PL to do their
Right.
work.
Agree.
And
Yeah.
they talked to me a little bit about, and I think this is common for a lot of distributors and a lot of manufacturers, right? They're going to work through a 3PL to actually do the receiving, storing of the inventory, shipping of the inventory. And they, as a business, are going to be focused on purchasing it, keeping the right stock levels, keeping the right customer base, keeping the pricing logic. So how, tell me more about what they did with their 3PL and what kind of technical considerations that led to for you.
I thought for 3PL, we built a custom solution where we built a record. They just provide a file on that and we store that file in are that custom record, and we can just processing a file based on file type. Based on file type, we creating the uh, inbound shipments, we creating the sales order, we creating the purchase order. That's how the very first thing we did on those things on 3PL.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was interesting, right? Because the 3PL we happened to be working with, albeit they were actually a pretty big 3PL company.
Right.
Um, but they didn't have any APIs, right? When we
Yes.
started working with them, they said, hey, we want to do a file transfer protocol or an
Yes.
FTP protocol. So tell me,
We
Naim, a little bit about some of the pros and cons of us working through an FTP protocol with the 3PL.
uh
So like what was good about that approach? What was bad about that approach? How well did NetSuite work in that type of FTP approach? Tell me some more there.
initially like SFTP approach is a good thing because it was a very secure, and previously they have a SFTP module, but
Yeah,
nowadays they have SFTP module, but previously they have a SFTP within a code. So you have to
correct.
use the SFTP code to connect with the third-party servers and pull the files from there. But right now, NetSuite have its own SFTP module. You just need to do install in your account and do the configurational thing, and you don't need to worry about anything. NetSuite itself go to the server party side and pull the files from there.
Yeah, or at least on the transmission portion for the
Yes,
SFTP, right? So when we
right.
think about an SFTP protocol, name your, I even forgot, right? Back in 2019, we had a scripted even to push and pull from the
Pushing.
SFTP.
Right,
Now there's a bundle, right, that you can install from NetSuite that you just put in the SFTP credentials and it will pull it down into the file cabinet automatically.
right,
Now, that's good that NetSuite can off the shelf support SFTP integration, but you notice I use air quotes very heavily, right? Because you know this, but potentially some of the audience here may or may not know this. Um, just because you pull a CSV file into the file cabinet
file cabinet.
doesn't actually process that file
Okay,
into an inventory adjustment, an item receipt, a sales order, a purchase order, a PO receipt, a sales order fulfillment, etc. Right? Um, so talk to me a little bit about when we did that with that customer, what, 6 years ago. Talk to me a little bit about like what do you have to do then? So yeah, they put a CSV file out in a SFTP location. We wrote a script to pull it into NetSuite, into the file cabinet in NetSuite. After we get in the
right,
file cabinet in NetSuite, what do you have to do to make it work? And then like what did we do about error handling in that case?
right. Previously, I can say we are not building actually 3PL to making a structure and making every field to map file to a particular custom record and particular field, like the customer name. We are not mapping a custom name perfectly, the vendor name and the item details and the other details we are not mapping correctly in the structure. We just taken a file in the initial level when we start with this client, and we can just like read the CSV file
Yep.
every line, and then just mapping into a NetSuite. And if everything is fine, then we can create the record for the inbound things. And if nothing, then we can just make that custom record into a error, and we can just store the error into a different field, and we can read the error, what was the error was coming, then we can work on that error portion as well later on. But it was not the quite structured way to do work with the 3PLs. But for the initial level, we just read the CSV file and map into NetSuite, everything is fine, then we can create the record. Otherwise, we can throw it custom record into error, and then store the error and work on those errors.
So then you keep talking about errors, right? And I think the first thing that at least is on most of our clients' mind when we say something like that is to say, well, you built the integration name.
Yeah, right.
why is there an error? Did you do a bad job writing the
It's
integration? Like, why would there still be, if you did a good job as a NetSuite developer, why would there still be an error on the
yeah,
integration? So
yeah,
talk to me about that.
if I'm talking about this, it's not about only the errors about the coding things. It's something kind of you sending a data that is not appropriate manner, and it if those data is also not in present in the NetSuite as well. So those kind of errors also happens in the file as well.
Yeah. So like it's just to make that a little more concrete, you
Uh,
know, we assume that, let's say sending us a sales order, right?
right.
And well, this is kind of a silly example, 3PL when it sends a sales order, but let's just pretend. Well, let's say it's an item receipt, right? So we've
I
got
know.
a PO, right? And when we make our PO, we send that, we create a file, put in SFTP so 3PL has it so they know what to receive against, right? And when they start receiving it, they're sending us back the item receipts that they're doing in their systems. That way in NetSuite, we can create the item receipt against the PO and have all that done automatically through this 3PL integration, right? Or what some people might call EDI. We'll get to EDI later. That's not technically EDI because EDI is based upon, UN or ANSI standards.
Yes.
We'll get to EDI stuff later. Anyways, we sent them the PO. They're doing the receipts and they send us back, right?
Right.
So, Naim, when you're talking about like errors here, maybe our PO has item A on it, item B on it,
Beyond.
item C on it. Now, if they send back through the SAP, they send a file and they say, hey, against PO number 1, I received 5 of item D.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
Well, when we're talking about errors, like, well, what do you do with that in NetSuite, right? Because item D wasn't on PO number 1. Only item A, B, and C was. There was no item D on PO 1. So when we talk about an error, it's like, well, what do we do with that, right? We
Right.
could, and name, we have a client where we did this for. We could, when it comes in, say, oh, well, item D is not on the PO, add it to the PO, and then do the item receipt, and then there would be no error. But for
Right.
most clients, they actually probably want that to be held up, saying, whoa, 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 whoa. Maybe the 3PL messed up and scanned in as the wrong item. Maybe the vendor sent the wrong item and we're not even going to receive it, right? This is a typical quarantine type of situation, but not like a physical quarantine because the PO inspector looked at and said, oh, that material's bad. This is like a systematic quarantine because your third party logistics company said they received something that's not even on the PO. So we need to put it to this error record or this staging record that says, hey, there's a problem here. You need to call the 3PL, you need to investigate this, and you need to give more information to the system before we can just process this item receipt.
Yeah.
So I bring that up because I think a lot of senior people who don't maybe specialize in operations day, a lot of the CFOs and whatnot that we work with will come back and say, well, there should never be an error. And it's like, no. When you're working with a third party company, there will always be an error. It's just a matter of how quickly do we communicate that error back to the partner that we're integrated with, right? Again, in distribution, you're going to be integrated with almost everybody, right? And whether it's a shipping company, third party logistics, your vendors, your customers, integrations are going to be bread and butter for what you do. So, how do we recognize an error? Now, and Naim, you might have some more context to add to this, but like in different approaches, right? If we were connected with a 3PL, let's say through APIs, right?
Yeah.
Or and that's what we would consider exposing restlets for them to hit our API or us going and hitting their API through any number of different scheduled script, MapReduce script, user events, whatever. The beauty of an API is that the third party gets that error message immediately, right? They
Right.
send their package of information and we immediately respond back with, no, there's a problem with it. Item D doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But
I
in an
agree.
SFTP approach, which is lower tech and usually a lower bar for your third parties to meet, tell me a little bit more. Like, okay, so you said you get an error. What happens? Like, what do you do in an SFTP approach? to remedy that error?
Like in SFTP approach is like we like we build a proper structure.
Yeah,
In SFTP approach, like definitely is in SFTP approach, we cannot send the response back quickly to the user. Hey, whatever file you send us for the inbound, it's not working. Fine.
yeah,
We have to shoot out the message later on, or we have to uh, uh, build a proper solution within a NetSuite, so user can come into NetSuite and see, okay, we sent this file, this is the file detail, and that record is not processing, and we need to show the reasons why that record is was not proper processing, to making a child error records and showing the proper error message on those. And like API, like if I'm talking about API and SFTP, if you sending a large file, then even we are not able to sending the error message at the same time via API as well. So in SFTP, it's there is a no part we can sending the error message at the same time. But yeah, definitely if the file size was small, then definitely we
yeah,
process at the same time and sending the response at the same time. But the file size is larger, then we have structured in the like uh header record and child record, and we store every detail
yeah,
in the header and child. Then after a few minutes, if those was large orders, then we can process automatically. If everything is going wrong, then we can make a one child record of error, and we can attach error details on those child record and mark the record as an error. And then you can user can do a save search and see what was the error was coming in the upcoming current uh
yeah,
SFTP EDIs. And
yeah. And I
yeah,
often think about it like when I think of, okay, we're gonna do an integration in the distribution space.
yeah,
If the parties you're integrating with are low tech, right? Let's say they're a relatively small company, they're not in the business of integrating, they don't integrate with many partners. You typically will end up in an SFTP approach. And I like to think of SFTP as one-way communication, right?
agree.
Party
Yeah,
A,
agree.
it's basically back to like that old, I was talking to my grandmother mailing stuff. It's like party A writes down on the thing, puts it in a mailbox or an SFTP location, which in the old days, they used to call it a
All
van.
day.
They literally call it a mailbox, right? You put your package up in the mailbox, they get it and they take it and they put it in their system, right?
Right.
And if there's any problem under an SFTP, I mean, you can do a lot of things, right? So I'm simplifying here, but typically, if there was any problem with what we sent them in the mail, to
Mm-hmm.
fix that problem, they would have to call us and say, "Hey, Ben, you put item D, change it to item A, and we're going to change the item A in our system." But they're going to do that all manually via phone call, right?
Right.
Because again, it's one way from an electronic perspective. It's one way communications. Any problems, you're going to pick up the phone and talk. So yes, it's integration. When there's not problems, it certainly saves labor time, right?
Right.
It's also very, very cheap, right? SFTP is effectively free, right? There's SFTP services now. You can get cloud-based ones that cost like $9 a month, right?
Yeah.
So unless your volume's huge, huge, but even if your volume's huge, still the transaction cost of SFTP tiny. Setting up SFTP, the pushing and pulling from there. Again, NetSuite has bundles that does it automatically.
Yeah. Or
Agreeing on
we,
the file type can
yeah.
be a little bit expensive because every partner is probably going to have their own file, right? You know, when we talk about SFTP, the other partner might not even be, they might not even have their system automatically taking that CSV file and importing it, right? They might
Yeah.
have a user going out to that SFTP location, downloading the file we sent them, and doing a CSV import on their side. We don't know. And in SFTP, we don't really care, right? That's the other party's problem. All we know is that when we need them to get something in our system, we're going to put it in that folder. And when they need us to put something in the system, they're going to put a file in that folder. How they deal with it on their side is none of our business, and we don't care. But it
Yeah.
is slow, right?
It is slow.
SFTP,
Agree.
you're talking, you know, up to 15 minutes. NetSuite's only going to get it into our file cabinet up to 15 minutes after they put it in there. Then we're going to need a different schedule script to read it in the file cabinet and transform it to a record. So it
Record.
is slow. It is a little bit of customization, but relatively low cost and a good approach.
Yeah.
So let's let that be. Let's move on to, you know, some bigger clients, right? Because in more recent years, you and I got out of the business of a couple hundred orders a day. with orders that were a couple thousand lines long, which
Yeah.
is in and of itself a whole different consideration in NetSuite and most ERPs. Let's start talking about some of our customers that had more advanced integration considerations. Let's pick on a parts company that did
Mhm.
replacement parts, shipping anywhere from 5 to 20,000 orders a day. They had the whole gamut of, well, they had their own complicated pricing structure, right? Um, and some stuff that they call best price, where based on different tiers, customers in different promotions from them, from the OEM, you could end up with 5 or 6 different prices for the same item, but then certain customers got the best price of those 5 prices. Certain customers got a specific price. So their pricing logic again was also very, very complex. But when you start thinking like, what can NetSuite do? Well, yeah, there's some work your implementation partner has to do to make that work, but you can make that work with NetSuite. But what I want to hit on is integrations, right? Because of their give or take 20,000 orders a day, 6,000 of those orders are going to come from API.
Yeah.
8,000 of those orders are going to come from what we call EDI,
EDI.
right? 500 of those orders are going to come from a more rudimentary SFTP approach. And then the other, give or take 5,000 orders are going to be someone on the phone taking
Input.
that
Yeah.
and keying in it. So all of these orders have to end up in as a sales order, for example. We'll just pick on sales. I have to end up as a sales order to be processed and to be shipped and fulfilled within 24 hours. So we hit on the rudimentary SFTP, right? Where you define your own file structure, working with a partner, drop it off in a location. We don't care what they're doing on their side. Let's go to the next level. And the next level to me is EDI, right?
Yeah.
Or you could argue anything's EDI. You could argue every single integration's EDI. EDI just stands for Electronic Data Interchange, right? It's a term from the 80s.
Yeah.
But to me, when I think of the differences of that first SFTP approach, right, where just the two parties were just picking whatever they want the CSV file look like, and that's what they were sending. When we get into official EDI, now we're talking about a standard
ANSI.
document, right?
Yeah.
If you're sending someone a purchase order, which on their side would be a sales order, you're sending an EDI 850, right?
Right.
And we call it an EDI 850 because of this, their standard organizations, like the ANSI format, right? The Standards Institute, right? They have a format of saying, hey, if system to system you're transmitting a file for a purchase order / sales order, here's the format it should have. And the header, it should say where it's coming from, and then it should say who it's shipping to. And then if
Yeah.
you define each sales order line, it should have an item
Right.
like this and price like this. And it's a very particular structure, right? Where you could go
Yeah.
and Google.
Every position is fixed in this format. You have to do the item number is here, quantity is here, and pricing is here. You cannot do the pricing in the first place and item name is the last place. So it's everything in the fixed format in this new EDI structure, which follow.
Correct, right?
Yeah.
And that was a solution that they were developing in 70s, 80s, 90s, right? So
Yeah.
that way everyone wasn't doing their own SFTP, right? Where every single, if you were a partner like this customer is that works with 90 different customers that they
Yeah.
have to do this type of integration with, well, they don't want to sit down 90 times and design a different file type 90 times, right? So
I
the
agree.
point of EDI was to standardize. Here's what the package of information looks like if you're sending a purchase order. Here's what the package of information looks like if you're sending an item receipt. Here's what the package of information looks like when you're sending a shipment confirmation. Here's what the package of information looks like when you're sending an invoice or a payment remittance.
Yeah.
Now, standards are, I think as you get into it, and as you and I got into this a lot more, I had actually done some 10 years ago back on my Microsoft days on
Mhm.
EDI also. You started getting into this heavily 6 years ago.
Yeah.
I think what you'll see is that standards with heavy air quotes, right?
Yeah.
Because there's not just one standard organization, there's two, right? ANSI and the UN has its own council, or that did EDIFACT, right? So there's ANSI and EDIFACT standards to begin with for this
Mhm.
old EDI approach. And everybody, let's say if you're following ANSI format, which most customers in North America are following the ANSI format for sending purchase orders, sales orders, item receipts, etc. There's no enforcement mechanism, right? To say
Right.
they have to follow the spec exactly as the Standard Institute did. So what happens is every customer wants a tiny bit of different information, right? And every format ends up being a little bit different, right? So everyone's like, oh, I want standard EDI.
With a little
That's
tweak.
like standard within like this circle, not
Yeah.
standard within this circle, right?
Yeah. Right.
Um, so that's something that you learn through experience, and certainly we have learned heavily. So I think but at the end of the day, EDI is just a file transfer protocol,
Right.
right? In the old days, you would put through a van. Now a lot of them are going closer to what is effectively an SFTP approach, right? Of
Right.
saying, hey, pass this location in this format, albeit the format is somewhat standardized. But why would it be different between customer A and customer B? Well, for example, maybe one customer needs to know not just what location did you ship it to, but they need to know specifically what store number did you ship it to. Maybe at the
Mhm.
same address, they've got store A and store B, right? But it's the
Correct.
same PS address. Well, they say, hey, I need to know store number also. Well, that's a deviation from the standard. So most of the partners that you work with are going to have, and you've seen a ton of these, right? They're going to have their own guide of saying, when
Right.
you're sending me an 850 and you're sending me an 855 and you're sending me this document, here's how we interpreted the ANSI standards. Here's the deviations. Here's the values that we're expecting you to put in, um, which is helpful, right?
Yeah.
Um, Now, when we're doing traditional EDI name, at least
Mhm.
in Crow's approach, there's a couple different ways this can be done, right? You can go to a full service company that's going to take everything out of NetSuite and take care of all of it for you, but they're going to charge a fair bit to do that. Equivalently, we could hypothetically in NetSuite make the specific format of all 90 companies or however many companies you're working with. We don't typically recommend that though, unless you have less than a couple. Third option, right? And the option that we typically do is saying, hey, we can get NetSuite to push all of the data about the transaction. Any field, any data element you might possibly need for any of those 90 customers, we can take them, we can push that out to a middleware, right? And then in that middleware, it lets you do all the mapping.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about that name. Like when you're thinking about as a technical architect saying, should we have NetSuite make this specific file, or should we have NetSuite just get the packet of all information you might possibly need and send it to a middleware? How do you think about doing it direct versus going through a middleware? Like what's the threshold? What goes through your mind as you're working through with a client to decide this?
Uh, if it like talking about middleware, I believe if the middleware was there, then it's their job to checking everything is it within the format or not. Like they follows the every rule or not.
Yeah,
We don't need to worry about that. The middleware is going to be take care about that part. And if anything is going wrong, then they can intertalk and do the correct things. And then the things was coming from our side. And if we directly talking about the SFTP side, then we have to take care about these things. Like we have to follow the format in the correct way. That was the difference.
yeah.
We are talking with the clients whenever we're talking about the middleware and directly to the SFTP.
Yeah. And I think the nice thing about like some of the middleware, whether it's Boomi,
Boom,
Jitterbit,
yeah,
EDI HQ,
yeah,
they make it very easy, right? If we send the whole packet of information of all the NetSuite data up to the middleware,
yeah,
if a customer calls up and says, hey, I used to just want street city,
yeah,
but now in my format, I want street city zip and attention field. Well,
yeah,
if we had sent all that out to the in the packet of information of all of the elements about this to the middleware. Those middleware systems are made to be very easy to just like drag and drop and say, okay, well, now I'll drag this and now I'll drag this in. And from now on, it's going to go in the right format, right? So if you have 90 different customers that you're doing this type of EDI with or this type of integration with, well, let's pretend a customer only changes their format once every 3 years that they ask for a change in the format.
Yeah.
Well, if you have 90 customers, how many format changes is that a year? On average, you'd expect 30, right? 90 customers change every 3 years. You'd expect you got to make 30 changes every year. Well,
Right.
if you're making 30 changes every year, you don't want to go into the JavaScript of NetSuite and put all these if statements. If this customer, then make it this format. If this customer, then make it this format. You don't want to do that on the ERP side, right? You want to take all the data you could possibly need, shove that to the middleware, and let the middleware's drag and drop tool make those changes, right? Now, on the flip side, if you have 2 customers that you need to do EDI with, or what we would call trading partners, and they're going to make a tweak once every 3 years, well, maybe you might just do that directly in NetSuite, right? Does it really make sense to pay thousands of dollars for this tool in the middle? It makes it easy to drag and drop. It's not. Probably not, right? Because it'd just be cheaper and easier to maintain directly in if statements inside the JavaScript code for how we're going to push out that file format. So that's at least how I typically think about it. It's just like, what's the propensity of change, right? How many different formats are you talking about? AKA, how many different trading partners are you talking about? Once you get past 2, once you get past 3, 4, 5, certainly once you get past 5, yeah, then you probably should be investing in a middleware. Let NetSuite push the package of data. Let the middleware deal with the mapping. If you're dealing with 1, 2, 3, maybe you can put the format, right? I know, Naim, you've got some, you got one customer, for example, that was going from a system they owned, an operation system they owned, to NetSuite, the ERP system they owned, which was 1-to-1, right?
Right.
And initially, they were sending that through Del Boomi, a middleware, right? And that just got so complicated, right? Where they're like, well, why are we doing that if we own this system and we own this system, and we know we're not changing this system hardly ever? Shouldn't I just send the data direct into NetSuite instead of going through a middleware? And ultimately, that's what you ended up helping them do, right?
Yeah.
Because there wasn't a ton of value there. Anyways, okay, so we talked a lot about the technical stuff, and I know we're getting close to our time. I don't want to keep everybody on here for hours. So EDI, again, whether you're doing it through Sligo, whether you're doing it through a middleware where NetSuite's pushing up the package information, this type of stuff, we can do. NetSuite can do in great volume, right? Our largest customers doing 20,000 a day EDI transactions, where we're having NetSuite, Naim and his team took everything in NetSuite, we push out to EDI HQ or whatever your middleware is. Yeah, you still need to hire someone to maintain the middleware, whether it's a third-party company or somebody internally, but from a NetSuite side, works pretty well. Staging errors, having full error handling and whatnot. And APIs we didn't get into as much just due to the time, so maybe Naim, we might have to do another session in the future to get into a little bit more API. NetSuite APIs engine also quite good. Benefit of APIs, it can give real-time feedback to the other partner, right? SFTP EDI is not going to give any real-time feedback. You're going to have to pick up the phone to resolve issues. API, they're going right away know that, nah, we don't accept this data. You sent in a bad format, we don't accept it. NetSuite can do great with that, right? Again, talking 6, 7, 8,000 orders a day coming in through API with customers. I think the trickier part with API is not NetSuite's API point, but making sure that the order create logic doesn't get overly complex, that take too much time, right? That's probably the bigger challenge. Anyways, all of that said, let's talk about a different aspect. We haven't got too much. For our clients that actually own their own warehouse and have their own warehousing.
Right.
NetSuite's made phenomenal strides here, right? When you started in NetSuite, there was no WMS solution. You had to go to a third party, whether it be RF Smart or a number of different ones out there in the market. Back in 2017, they acquired a WMS company. In 2019, they completely rewrote their WMS logic to the point now where it's really, really good. It's not just good out of the box, it's also good on being able to customize it. So, Naim, tell me, in today's world, you work almost exclusively with manufacturing distribution companies.
Yeah.
Give or take, what percent of the enhancement work are you doing? What percent of the enhancement work that you do is on the new WMS scanning app? If you had to guess.
Uh, I would say 30 to 40%.
30 to 40%, huh?
Yeah.
And when did it become technically capable to customize the SCM app or the WMS?
I can say just before we started 6 months or 1 year, 6 months, I can say 1 year.
Mhm.
Previously, it was not that much capable to do the customization, but right now it's a very well opportunity to do the customization in WMS app. You can make the changes within its own functionality, and if you wanted to build your own functionality, we can do that as well. Like we build something, uh, replenishment process. Replenish process was not in the given by the standard WMS, but we built within the WMS app that is totally a different customization. So we
Yeah,
can do that kind of heavily customization in WMS nowadays, but previously that was it's kind of a dream kind of thing we can do or not.
yeah, yeah. So on this scanning app, on this WMS app, 30 to 40% of the work you're doing now is there, huh? That's
Yeah,
crazy.
like they have very good amount of requirements in WMS app because previously it was not customizable, so people have the already a junk backlogs for there already. If some days it's open for the development, then we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. So we have that.
Yeah. Well, I think we see that too, right? Like with warehouse workers in particular,
Right,
they are measured heavily on efficiency, right?
right. Agree.
More,
Yeah,
much more so than the office workers doing sales orders or accounting, right? The warehouse workers, efficiency, 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 right? So
yeah,
for them, as they're walking around and as they got their scanner and they're scan,
yeah,
scan, 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 right?
yeah,
Any extra click, any extra screen, any extra words on there is a problem, right?
yeah.
And they've always been pushing, saying, "Hey, how can we change this?" Right?
Right.
And with some third-party solutions in the past, you're able to do that, but you ended up spending more money with a third-party solution. Every time you had to customize it, they'd be angry and this or that. Um, but the beauty of what NetSuite's done now, albeit the documentation on how to do it is not strong, right? And
Yeah, I
you know
agree.
this, right? You had to train most of our team. A
Yeah,
lot of it we had to figure out with trial and error, but boy, what you can do now, it's inside a technical framework that's owned and supported by Oracle NetSuite.
Oracle network. Yeah,
You've got flexibility to build all kinds of stuff, whether it's tweaking the existing flow or just
yeah.
thinking about completely net new flows,
Net
right?
new.
So, Naim,
Yeah,
I know you recently posted on LinkedIn about a different one, right? Where a customer came to us with a requirement saying, hey, we have a trade show where we go and we sell our parts at trade shows occasionally.
yeah,
And at the trade show, it gets pretty crazy because a lot of people lined up and like they were using NetSuite and they were trying to type in all the orders on the sales orders and it was taking a really long time, right? Tell me, what did we end up doing for that customer, right? Faced with, they said, hey, how can we get our sales order entry to be faster at trade show, knowing we have that physical product there and customers want to take their product and go? What did we end up doing in that case?
Mm. In that case, like it was a net new different customization which they required, and for that we built a uh, new process within the WMS where they can just came and we provide a one form. They just enter the form, they pull enter the details, whatever they want, what they sell in the show. there, and they just submit the form and we build the transaction. So
Yeah, yeah. And the cool thing too is like because these were parts at the event, like
right.
everything had a barcode on it, right? So
Yes.
before where they were sitting there and trying to type in, it was taking a long time,
Yeah.
right?
They
Now they
can.
were just able, just like when you go to the Apple store, right? When you go to an Apple store, how do you buy something? Well, you pick the thing off the shelf and the representative comes to you, they scan it right there, you sign on there, and then you're done. Helpless, right? This we were able now on the NetSuite through the framework that the WMS or SCM, we keep calling it WMS/SCM. So NetSuite calls it the supply chain management, supply chain mobile or SCM app, right? We generically are going to refer to it as WMS because almost everything on there is being, the traditional functions that a WMS team would be expected to do. But, this trade show, that's not traditional WMS, right? That's almost more like
Right.
a point of sale type of functionality. But boy, it worked really well because they just had a couple of their warehouse Zebra scanners, right? And they were able to really make this a seamless transaction for
Mm.
their customers. We had another customer who was selling out of a van, right? Or they had their reps take their product around to all the different gas stations, right? To try and
Yeah.
sell to fill up the shelf at the gas stations if they needed more. We end up doing the same thing with that through the SCM app, right?
Yes.
We've had customers, you mentioned replenishment process. We've had customers,
We built a new thing like palletization as well.
yeah.
Customer.
Tell me a little more about that one, name.
Yeah, like they while they are picking, they wanted to also do the palletization to like making labels on the already packed containers. So they
Mm-hmm.
wanted a palletization mobile app requirement where they can just scan those uh, packing containers into a big pallet.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, at this point, I don't know if this is an overstatement name, but in my opinion, at this point, you can relatively quickly and relatively cheaply
Right.
add almost any workflow you want on the
Anyway.
WMS scanner. Yes, you need a developer.
Yes.
Yes, the developer needs a few days of training on the framework of the SCM app,
Yeah.
but
Because
it's
yeah.
pretty great after that. I mean, I think anyone who's listening to this or anyone who, is a NetSuite customer that has physical inventory, who's like, I don't want to use a third party. NetSuite standard flows are a bit limiting. I
Yeah.
think it's critical they know, boy, you get the right team to work with, they can do anything, and they can do anything in a sustainable way that's approved by NetSuite, that has it's part of SDF, that has all of the rigor that you would expect coming from an Oracle NetSuite behind it, but giving you the flexibility to do almost anything. That right there is game changing. So we think about the technical changes that NetSuite's been involved with on opening up processors, increasing concurrency, giving us more visibility and control to how we sequence large jobs, right? We think about the things that NetSuite's doing through their autonomous database, right? To automatically be going and doing database indexing when you start getting large amounts of data,
Right.
albeit that sometimes has some problems, but that's a different podcast,
Yeah.
right? That's a whole different podcast.
Right.
But you think about that, you think about what they've done on the WMS mobile app and the ability to customize the WMS mobile app. NetSuite's legit now. NetSuite's legit for a manufacturing distribution company. Like even
I
for these
agree.
higher volume ones, we don't see, unless you're seeing things I'm not, we don't see that many blockers of saying, no, NetSuite can't handle a company doing 2 million orders a year.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, it can. It can. When you started your career, it probably couldn't.
Yeah. It can.
Now,
Yes, it can. Like
now it can.
we can say it's also can handle a size of larger than mid-size company.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Certainly, again, dollar value is hard to do. I think orders per year is probably fair, right? But
Right.
certainly companies doing 1 million a year, definitely it can handle, right? I
Right.
would argue 5, 10 million orders a year. It can also, there you need to be in its top tier, right? So there is some pricing considerations there. But outside of the pricing discussion, the technical framework is there, right? Even with
Right.
our customers that we're having, some performance considerations, if they paid more, those issues would go away immediately. They could get more processors, they could get more concurrency, right? So it's mostly just a commercial conversation. It's not a technical platform conversation. Can NetSuite do it? Can NetSuite not do it? The ease of flexibility, customization, integration, WMS changes that NetSuite has, it can do it. I know it sounds like a sales pitch, but this really isn't. There's just two guys who are passionate and excited about NetSuite just talking, who are maybe a little bit more nerdy on the technical side for helping
Yeah.
these distributors. So anyways, Naim, we've talked for a long time here. I got through most of the agenda that we were asked to talk to on this quick podcast, this quick video recording.
Mhm.
Maybe we wrap it up here. But as we wrap up, Naim, just talk to me, maybe closing comments, right? Maybe give me 2-3 minutes of closing comments, your thoughts, NetSuite in the high volume distribution space, any final concerns, comments, and maybe your summary of your viewpoint for how NetSuite performs now for these big distributors.
Uh, I can say for now, I don't think we have really any concern about the network performance. I can say we are ready to take a handle of good amount of uh, data, giant data clients. They have a huge number of orders, like 1 million or 2 million, 3 millions in a year. We are able to definitely can handle easily. So I am not pretty much concerned of anything right nowadays for doing a NetSuite implementation for a big distributors or manufacturing clients.
Yeah. I'll end this by saying I agree with you. The technical framework is there,
Yeah.
right? The technical capability is there. There's some things like not being able to control the database indexing, this or that cause some nuance, but that's true of every system. Every system has a few pain points.
Really?
It's
Yes.
definitely there. I
Yes.
think what's missing is the ecosystem, the NetSuite developers, partners, administrators, internal developers. Since NetSuite used to play a little further down market in the distribution space, and you face this name with your juniors, right? Or people we hire in the market. You need to make sure that you hire the right team that's been there, that's done that, right?
Yeah.
When Naim and
I
I are talking about processing 1, 2, 3 million orders a year, that's because we have actual clients that we still work with every single day that are doing
yes.
that.
Right.
We understand the pros and cons, we understand the pain points there. But the reality is, Naim, through your journey the last 6-7 years, you learned a lot of those lessons the hard way,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
By having different performance issues, by having different concurrency issues, by having different processor utilization issues. So I think the weakness of NetSuite now is not technical, it's the support and implementation community.
Right.
There are very, very few people like Naim who have specialized in this type of client with these types of performance considerations, with these types of industry knowledge, like the EDI conversation we were in
Yeah.
earlier. So NetSuite can do it, but boy, you really do need a Naim Ansari and his team of specialists that he's been working with for the last half decade to support you. If you have that, you'll be in. I mean, these projects are hard and risky. Let's not, I don't want to say, and any company doing millions of orders a year when they switch ERPs, that's a major, major undertaking, a very costly undertaking. But to know that you've got a team that's been there, done that, hopefully this podcast and this conversation helps you feel a little bit more comfortable that, this is a serious area of focus for us at Grow. Serious area of focus for me and Naim and a bunch of our other colleagues. And yeah, we love doing that. So I'll wrap that up. I don't mean to make this a sales pitch. Hopefully everyone got something valuable out of our conversation here today. please reach out to Naim and I. We're both active on LinkedIn. We're both, NetSuite nerds, if you would call us that, who would love to get any feedback, thoughts, comments, even if it's stuff disagreeing with what we said here. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much. And we'll be back in a couple months to talk some more. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.